What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Smash JT. Microsoft has released the Xbox Series X for testing for people to be checking this thing out, and I know I made a few videos before talking about why somebody would even want one of these things, because if you want to play these games, you can just play them on a PC. There's no real reason to go out and spend $500 on an Xbox Series X next generation console as opposed to the PlayStation 5 that has a whole bunch of exclusives that you can't play anywhere else, things like that. One of the biggest things to come out of the playtesting from the Xbox Series X is something that, while I did talk about, I didn't make much of a deal about it: the load times. Let's just get right to it. The load times of the Xbox Series X are unfreaking real. The video I'm going through right now is from Austin Evans on YouTube, and he did a comparison for a few different games, the first one being Forza, and how it loads entirely to start up for the game to play in 10 seconds for the race, as opposed to the Xbox One X at 45 seconds and the Xbox One S at 50 somewhat seconds. Halo 5 loading up in 8.5 seconds compared to the Xbox One X at 33 and the Xbox One S at 26. It changes the entire complexion of the game. Another game, Red Dead Redemption, one of the more taxing games on the system. This game is notorious for terrible load times. The Xbox Series X loads it up in 37 seconds in comparison to over a minute and a half. We're talking a minute and 37 seconds and a minute and 38 seconds respectively for the Xbox X and the Xbox S just to play Red Dead Redemption. Now, the reason why I'm feeling like this is a much bigger deal than a lot of people were making it out to be initially were one of the big turnoffs for next-gen gaming. I mean, argue this all you want, but a lot of retro gamers would say the reason why they enjoy retro gaming is because the simplicity is obviously one of the things. The nostalgia is another one. But the third thing is they just want to hop in and play a game. And these next-gen consoles up to this point, before the Xbox One X, Series X, and the PlayStation 5 release, were notorious for terribly long load times for certain games. And with this change taking place, it might open up the doors for a lot of retro gamers to say, okay, if that's what it looks like for me to load up a console and just hop in and play the game, I am interested to check this out. I can't tell you guys how much time I personally have wasted just sitting in front of my game console waiting for it to load the game. The SSD hard drive in the Xbox Series X is legit game changing. It will revolutionize how next-gen consoles are going to be loading the games as far as Microsoft is concerned. Now, this series test doesn't go into the PlayStation 5, which has its own SSD and obviously will have faster load times as well, but just in general, it takes a much more broad approach to the market when it comes to these games and how fast they're going to be loading. The Verge put out a comparison of load times. They go through the Xbox Series X compared to the highest end Xbox of the current generation, the Xbox One X, and these load time changes or differences are absolutely ridiculous. Call of Duty Warzone loads up in 16 seconds compared to 21 seconds. Not a huge deal, but the big one, Red Dead Redemption, like I said, 52 seconds compared to a minute and 35. The Outer Worlds, 6 seconds as opposed to 27 seconds. Evil Within 2, 33 seconds compared to 43. Sea of Thieves, 20 seconds as opposed to a minute and 21 seconds. A full minute and 1 second difference for that one. Warframe, 25 seconds compared to a minute and 31 seconds. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, 30 seconds compared to 1 minute and 7 seconds. No Man's Sky, 1 minute and 27 seconds, which is a long time, compared to 2 minutes and 13 seconds. Destiny 2, 43 seconds compared to 1 minute and 52 seconds. So, by and large, it is less than half of the load time for Series X of these retro generation games going into next generation. And keep in mind, these games have not been optimized for the Xbox Series X. This is just pure raw speed and power behind them. And that's just going into the load times of these games. It's not even talking about the improved performance that The Verge goes into, talking about how not only these games load faster, but in many cases they feel a lot smoother. Destiny 2 is a great example of a game that was held back by the weaker CPU and slow HDD in the Xbox One X. It's a title that hit native 4K previously, but the 6 teraflops of GPU performance in the Xbox One X was bottlenecked by a laptop-like CPU and an old spinning hard disk. This meant the game was stuck on 30 frames per second. Even on the Xbox One X, which was a very powerful system, it wasn't getting the full potential out of the game. And it says, while Bungie was committed to enhancing Destiny 2 for the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 with 60 frames per second support, it already feels faster without the patch. I would regularly notice frame rate drops in Destiny 2 on the Xbox One X when things got a little hectic on screen during a public event or a raid with mobs of enemies coming at you. I haven't seen a single stutter running Destiny 2 on the Xbox Series X. And this is just talking about previous gen games running on the new Xbox Series X, not even taking into account what the next gen games coming to the Xbox Series X are going to be and how they're going to feel. I think it just gets into how, I guess, we've just gotten comfortable with sloggy gameplay and 30 frames per second and choppy games, which is hysterical because the most recent generation, until the next one, was supposed to be getting rid of all that stuff, but because they were putting so much into the games, it was running into the same issues that previous generations had. The slow frames per second, the slow load times, the graphical glitches, the errors in the game, all of those things that will be fixed with the Xbox Series X. So there's a lot to get excited about with this thing. Ultimately, if you have a super powerful PC, you already won't be running into those issues anyways. But for people that don't want to spend $1,400, $1,500, $1,600 on a super powerful PC to be able to run these games without issues, a $500 entry point price for the Xbox Series X really isn't that bad. And I think from that perspective, it explains why there's so many people trying to get one of these. Last check, they said that there were a 60-40 split between people who wanted to get, a 60% wanted to get the PlayStation 5, and a 40% wanted to be getting the Xbox Series X on launch day. So, a lot more than I was expecting, but after seeing these results of the playback and things like that, it makes sense that there's a lot that the Xbox Series X has to offer. Ultimately, it always comes down to the games, and that's one thing I have concerns with of the Xbox Series X. Are there going to be exclusives that make people want to get it? Yes, they just bought Bethesda and Obsidian, and they have all those games coming, but they also said that they're not making them console exclusive off the bat, so I'm discounting that right now. What is going to be the must-buy game for the Xbox Series X now that Halo Infinite has been delayed indefinitely? It still makes me want to get the PlayStation 5 first, but ultimately, I still would want to get the Xbox Series X after seeing these huge, huge improvements in performance and just how the games are playing after those load times. Because I'll be honest with you guys, just being real, I was getting really sick of 2-minute load times just to get into playing a game. That is ridiculous. Anyways, I'm going to leave the video right there. Interested to hear if this changes your mind and perception of the Xbox Series X, or if you still feel like there aren't any games for you to want to get it, or where you're even at with this whole next generation console thing anyways. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, you stay smashing. Smash.